The School of the Prophets was in session at Kirtland from January 1833 through April 1833. It was in the adjoining room of the school that on February 27, 1833, Joseph Smith received the word of wisdom. The first men to hear it were the men of the school.
When the word of wisdom was first presented by the prophet Joseph Smith, as he came out of the translating room and was read to the school, there were 20 out of 21 who used tobacco, and they all immediately threw their tobacco and pipes into the fire. Zebedee Coltrane.
You do get a range of responses to the word of wisdom, and you've got the cold turkey crowd who did that, and then you've got others who were a little more lenient with the whole thing, and realizing, taking the revelation at its word, where it says this is not sent by commandment or by constraint, at least at this point in time. Later on it does become a commandment, but that's 90 years later. And initially it's a word of wisdom. It's exactly what it says. This is a smart thing to do, but not by commandment. And so you've got your cold turkey crowd, you've got others a little more lenient. And I think it is significant that Joseph Smith himself was definitely on the more lenient side of things. And I know that this sometimes trips people up to hear that Joseph was not one who was throwing, everything into the fireplace and walking away. But I think it's an important point. What the prophet does is he reveals the word of the Lord. And in February of 1833, the word of the Lord was, "Here is a word of wisdom, sent to you by greeting, not by commandment or by constraint. Here's some counsel to help you avoid problems down the road." And that's what's revealed in February of 1833. That's the standard that is lived for decades.
The very first verses say to be sent by greeting and not by constraint or commandment, which is not at all how it's interpreted today. Today, it is a constraining commandment for Latter-day Saints. In 1833, they didn't view it that way. So I think the first thing for any student of our history and of our doctrine to realize is we have to be careful of not slipping into presentism, which is where when we impose our view and our standards on people of the past. Joseph Smith seems to interpret the word of wisdom more as avoid drunkenness, avoid a lack of intemperance, but not as absolutism.
Many modern members of the church simply assume that from the moment the word of wisdom was received, that's it, no one drank anymore, that's the end of coffee and tea. And then they will read accounts of the packing list for pioneers crossing the plains and say, why are they packing 10 pounds of coffee? Why are they packing tea? What are they doing with this tobacco that they're bringing? That can cause a problem because they don't realize that the word of wisdom is something that progresses over the course of time.
Indeed, the word of wisdom came forth in a culture of growing concern for health. But keep in mind that it was revealed to the School of the Prophets, a group of men bent on learning the mysteries of God.
In the larger cultural context, other people were talking about America's drinking too much alcohol. There's this temperance movement, this idea that we need to temper our consumption of alcohol. There's people who were trying to get, talking about the evils of tobacco. There's all this stuff going culturally. But to think that the word of wisdom is just an outgrowth of the larger cultural and social movements that were afoot, I think is to miss the real significance of the word of wisdom. The culture, society was doing it for social reasons, for health reasons. I think fundamentally the word of wisdom is about for spiritual reasons, that you abstain from these things. And this School of the Prophets, which is working literally on cleaning themselves up so that they can stand in the presence of God, one of the first things they learn they need to do is get rid of the tea, the coffee, the tobacco, the alcohol, and things like that.
One of the overarching goals of the School of the Prophets was to create a holy people, a sanctified group of people who were ready to commune with God face to face. That's what they're trying to do. That's the question on Joseph Smith's mind, more than any, is how do I sanctify a group of people to have them prepared to be able to be in the presence of God? His question is not, how can I make the School of the Prophets members more healthy? His question is, how can I make them more holy? And that's what the Word of Wisdom is getting at more than anything. Boyd K. Packer said, everything that violates the spirit of the Word of Wisdom is not listed. He said, arsenic, for example, certainly harmful. But he says, if we have to be commanded in all things, we are not wise stewards. So the overarching principle of the Word of Wisdom, temporally, which connects spiritually, is treat the physical body well. Take care of it. Use it as a gift from God.
One of the important things of the Word of Wisdom is that it's a testimony of the prophetic nature of the prophet Joseph Smith. In verse 4, behold, thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence of evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days. So Joseph is in the 19th century, and he has no idea of what the future holds, other than he gives this warning that in the future there'll be conspiring men.
One of the things that is difficult about some modern day substances is they rob us of our ability to exercise our agency well. We can become a slave to addiction. And that might sound like a modern day thing, but as early as Joseph Smith, in his context, he watched people in his day become slaves to alcohol. He watched people in his day become slaves to tobacco. So I think an overarching principle of the Word of Wisdom is, let's make sure that we don't become slaves to certain substances, that they overtake our ability to act proactively as agents unto the Lord. So notice this temporal and then spiritual back and forth in 18 to 21. The Lord first says that I will give you health in your navel and marrow in the bones. So physical health, increased physical health, is a promise of the Word of Wisdom. By the way, it doesn't mean we're going to avoid sicknesses and the problems of mortality. That's part of life. I do think what it says is it will help optimize your health. Then the Lord gives a spiritual blessing where he says you'll receive wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures. So that's, again, in the context of the School of the Prophets, we're trying to prepare a people to be able to commune with God. You'll be healthy, but you'll be more in tune spiritually to commune with God. Then he jumps back to health. You'll run and not be weary, and you'll walk and not faint. Then he jumps back to spiritual. And I think this last spiritual one is the one that we overlook, but might be the most important. He says, and I, the Lord, give unto you a promise that the destroying angel shall pass by you and not slay you as the children of Israel. The Word of Wisdom acts as almost a latter-day marker for Latter-day Saints. The moment you and I go out into the world and we say, I don't consume any alcohol, I don't consume tea or coffee or tobacco, it will set us apart as a different people.
The Word of Wisdom is a prophetically revealed interpretive document. Finding out what the Word of Wisdom meant when God first gave it to Joseph in 1833 is interesting, but essentially immaterial to how we live our lives today, right? The Word of Wisdom today doesn't mention at all the use of illegal drugs like cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine. Yet, the prophets have declared that the use of such illicit and illegal drugs is a violation of the Word of Wisdom. It's important that we understand that what we do with the Word of Wisdom, the reason why we live it the way that we live it, is entirely based upon what prophets and apostles have to say about it.
What substances might be developed? What practices might be invented that are either good for the body, that are added to as a recommendation to follow, or that are very harmful to the body that God, through his prophets, seers, and revelators, adds to the body of the word of wisdom? I don't know. Time will tell.